So, welcome back to another episode of the Half and Half Scarf Football Podcast with me, Nick, and my mate Dom. We are celebrating today episode 26. I'm sure Dom doesn't want to mention that, so we'll move on from his I can't believe it's not butter episode that we always talk about. I think we've probably done that to death for a little while, Dom. We might keep that in the bag till we get to 50 maybe. But
Yeah,
anyway, today we're doing quite an interesting episode and a bit off-piste for us, really. It's something that's fascinated Dom particularly and done a lot of research into. We're going to explore the Athletic Club player model in Spain and could it work elsewhere? And if it did, what would it take to make it work? And what's the implications for a club and for things like academies and that kind of stuff? So, without further ado, to talk about what we're going to look at today, Dom, let's have a look at the Athletic Club model. First of all, welcome. Secondly, that's not a football top. And
no, mate.
thirdly, for those who are watching on YouTube, let me explain mine first, then we'll come to your classic. It's really nice, by the way.
Thank you.
Why am I wearing the current Middlesbrough third shirt? And very briefly, we'd played two away games in this third shirt. I absolutely love the design of the shirt, but we'd lost both away games. We played last Friday as the time of recording away at Hull. If we'd have lost in it again, I would have burnt it because that would have been a very unlucky shirt. But we were 4-0 up at half time in an absolutely amazing performance by Middlesbrough. So this is now my favourite shirt because it's not unlucky anymore. So it's a beautiful thing. It's well designed, lots of detail in it. I won't go into any more detail than that. But I look forward to wearing it many more times in many more away games and many more performances like the first half at Hull last week. So it's back on my body as a favoured shirt. So moving on from that, Dom, not a football shirt, but a classic Puma hoodie by the looks of it.
It's a hoodie I wear at the game, and I wear it up at Middlesbrough sometimes because it's obviously red. We were discussing off air, mate. I was going through my shirts before we came on today, and I just suddenly decided that I hated every one of the other shirts that I've got, and I just don't want to wear them. So I'm either going to start from scratch or start investing in some more. But I think we've managed to get through 26, so that's not too bad, is it? So
No, again, rotate again, mate, because I've
rotate
got
again.
I've got a couple that I've not worn, maybe because I don't know whether I can get them over my head. Uh,
Yeah,
but I will dig one out for the next episode, and then maybe start revolving again. You know, no one cares really. I think we'll
no one
move on from
cares.
that because those who are listening going, "Can we get on with it, please?"
They're
So
just desperate for the content, what we're going to talk about, not what we're wearing, mate. Not how we
exactly,
got here.
exactly. Well, talking about content, we're going to do a bit of housekeeping first before we get into the Athletic Club model. There's a lot happened in world football in the last couple of weeks. Not least of which has been the interminable draw for the World Cup itself, which we covered last week in some detail on episode 25, and the fact that it was fixed, and the fact that it was seeded, and the fact that we think FIFA are an absolute shower of corrupt bastards. But more importantly than that, you want to go back a bit to October the 13th, Tom, don't you? Episode 16. What's your take on where we were in October and what's happened this week in the press?
So we did an episode, didn't we, mate? And I was really passionate about discussing World Cup ticket prices, and there'd already been tranches of tickets sold, and you could already see the prices per category. We discussed them in detail and what an absolute rip-off it was, and that FIFA were robbing the fans, and it was now a World Cup for corporates and prawn sandwich brigade and billionaires. We were, ordinary fans were being closed out, and on resale platforms you could already get World Cup final tickets for 50 grand from robbing bastards who wanted to, rip off the ordinary fan. I've just been quite surprised in the last week of the amount of people on social media who are suddenly all very surprised when they've announced the ticket prices for the main draws and for the main tranche of tickets. I'm like, I'm not getting at people, but what planet have you been on? What did you think FIFA were going to do? They announced this months and months and months ago. And the tragic thing is, all the football associations of the various countries already knew this. The FA's known about it and have kept remarkably silent about the whole thing. And all I'd say to people is, and I've said this before, the only way this is going to change and the only way FIFA are going to back down or even consider change is if people boycott the World Cup. The only way you can talk about it till you're blue in the face, us talking about it, social media talking about it. The only way you will get change is if people don't go to the World Cup. So it's all well and good having half empty stadiums, but How amazing would it be if it was literally empty? Not because we want that, we want our true fans to be there to support our teams, but based on the principle of what FIFA are doing to the ordinary fan, it would be wonderful if it was an empty spectacle just to show them that we're in control, not them.
Well, I saw a stat this week saying that the price of the tickets for the quarter-final, semi-final, and finals, I didn't look at the rest of them, were four times the price of what they were in Qatar. There is
Yeah.
absolutely no justification for a fourfold increase in ticket prices for a quarter for anything in a 4 year
Yeah.
cycle. Nothing in the world deserves a fourfold increase.
Well, absolutely, mate. And I read a really good, and I mentioned this at the time, and I heard someone mention this again on socials in the week and saying, because some people were saying about, oh, well, certain ticket prices are okay, £200 or £300 for a group match. It's like someone said, hang on, it's not. Just because it might seem like a reasonable amount of money, that's still not. Even £200 to £300 for a match ticket is completely exorbitant. It's not
That,
right.
that's for one person, by
That's
the
for
way.
one person for
Who
one
goes to
match.
football on their own? By the way,
Yeah,
very few people.
exactly. And a World Cup final, a semi-final ticket is in the region of £1,500 to £2,000. A group match ticket, I think one of Mexico's games, in a game that is not remotely interesting to most fans, even their own, they'll have to fork out nearly £1,000 for a ticket for you to watch all your country, all the group phases and quarterfinals and everything, and get to the final. It would cost you the best part of £8,000 for one person just for your tickets.
Yeah,
And FIFA will they're going to be making around 11 billion from this tournament, of which they will take most of the revenue. And their strapline is, well, we'll invest it back into football. But
no
you
one.
don't, FIFA. That's the thing is you don't. And the thing is, even if you did, you don't need to rip off the average fan to do it. You can still your job is to invest in football 365 days of the year, but you do it on a reasonable and scalable level, and you do it on an affordable level, and
Mm.
it's all about the ordinary fan being at the game. That's what it's about, and most of the host cities are going to walk away in huge debt, between 250 and £300 million in debt for
Yeah.
actually just hosting the games. And my other rant, I'll get on a rant about. Let's talk about Rio Ferdinand, shall we?
Oh,
What a fucking balloon that
hang
man
on,
is.
hang on, hang on.
Man of the
Is it?
people. Man of the people.
Man of the people, Rio
Oh yeah,
Ferdinand.
sorry, Nick. Yeah, he's man of the people. He's really in touch with the average man, isn't he? I love the fact that Dan Rowan of the BBC totally caught him on the hop. Did you listen to what he said? I mean, you should go back. Everyone, go back and listen to it. Dan Rowan caught him sat in his chair. I think even before the World Cup draw presentation, when he was completely unprepared. Just listen to the shite he comes out with. It's absolutely embarrassing. Oh, and another thing, Rio, just a small bit of housekeeping. Dan Rowan's a journalist. He works for the BBC, and he asks you a question, and then he has the microphone there waiting for your answer. So you don't need to say the word listen, because he clearly is listening to you, because he's just asked you a fucking question, because he's a journalist, you moron. And then the other thing on socials is after he's done his presenting duties, he puts this great big thing of him in shadow, dropping a mic, saying, that's presenting duties done, over and out. It's like, Rio, take your head out of your arse for 5 seconds and realise what you're doing. You're basically in FIFA's pocket. You've sold out for a massive payday, which you don't need because you already had loads of money and you now live in Dubai, so you don't pay tax. And if you remember where you came from, where you started in life, then you would be a man of the people, but tragically you're not. So you've sold out the ordinary fan and you're an advocate for what FIFA are doing. So you're an embarrassment, you're an absolute joke, you've been called out on socials, and I hope it really comes back to bite you, you sad man. And that's all I'm going to say on that, Nick.
Okay, well, that's a nice rant. We'll finish that in a second. I want to add into there the likes of your Gary Nevilles and your likes of you David Beckhams who'll sell their
Oh, yeah.
absolute granny for 5p. Literally will go anywhere for a bloody paycheck and do anything for a sponsorship and do anything for an image rights. And,
Yeah.
Gary Neville, for Christ's sake, he's supposed to be this kind of honourable, a man of substance and a man of principle. He's got no principles whatsoever when it comes to taking a paycheck from anyone and everyone who will give him any money whatsoever. Going back to Qatar, going back now in forward to the World Cup, and Beckham. I'm sorry, great footballer that he was. You weren't exceptionally great. You were a decent, really good footballer, but you are a brand. You'll sell your soul to anyone for anything to keep relevant and keep your misses
Yeah.
in the public eye. And let's stop there, Dom, because we want to get on
Oh,
to something
and
more
just to get
positive.
his knighthood as well, for services to football.
Well,
Services to football.
I'll be
Let's
honest with
let's
you,
let let that sink in, everyone. Services to football.
the
Mm.
knighthood has been begged for at least 10 years. That's
He
why he's not
has.
knighted.
Yeah, he has. It's sad man. Sad man.
Moving on, we didn't think we were going to start with that, but we've got to get things off our chest sometimes.
We have.
It's been a week of media coverage for the stuff that really pisses us off. So that's one of the things. Let's get on to something more positive. Let's get on to the Athletic Club
Yes.
in Spain. In the top division in Spain, they've been shall we say, a fixture in the top division in Spain for years and years and years. And, despite the fact that they've not really broken the dominance, and very few would ever break the dominance of Barcelona and Real Madrid, and occasionally, Atletico Madrid will do that. Athletic Club have won a couple of trophies. They've been a mainstay in the division. And they do it. How do they do it, Dom? Let people know about their
Yeah.
kind of
So
their player recruitment and their player activity.
philosophy. Yeah. So I've always been fascinated in this, and I really like Athletic Club. I just love what they stand for, and you just touched on it there. But what's really impressive, mate, is they've never been relegated from La Liga.
Mm,
They're only one of three clubs. You can guess the other two, can't you? I don't have to name them. That in itself is really impressive. Never been relegated.
yeah.
So, I'll give a brief history. So they go back to 1898, and they're in the Basque region. So it's Basque it's a people, a language, it's a region. It's located in the Western Pyrenees, and Basque it's an ethnic group with a distinct culture and genetic ancestry. One of the oldest populations in Europe, and it's an indigenous language, and it's something they're very, very proud of. Something you probably don't get in England. We don't see stuff like that, so it's very unique to certain parts of Europe.
Hang on. They're doing Cornwall, and we doing Yorkshire, mate.
Yeah,
That kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. So it's it's most famous for, so their philosophy is it's unique player recruitment philosophy. So it focuses on only signing players from the Basque country or players with Basque roots. So they essentially they're never in the transfer market. So there's no transfer policy. They can sell players, and they can bring in coaching staff and managers who are non-Basque. But in terms of their players, it's all from their academies. So their academy is their key thing. So I think what I love is it just promotes homegrown players and a club loyalty. And reading about their academy, I think the things that really jumped out to me, mate, was they've have to invest significantly in terms of financial and technical investment, because it needs to be an elite academy, because these players need to come through and compete at a high level. But I think the things that I loved from it, what reading about it was, I mean, they're all obvious really, but it's things that we all aspire to, especially in something like a team game like football. So all the players grow up together, so they all share local culture and life experiences, and it means they forge deep bonds from an early age. So they're all in it together. So they actually know the complete, ethos of teamwork. And it, I think the thing that they value, and I think the reason why it works is it brings in a fierce sense of belonging, and that enhances the team performance. So you look at the likes of what they're up against. I mean, some seasons they won't win things or they'll struggle, but they're always in the top half of the league, and
Mm.
it's that sense of belonging and fierce loyalty that gets them through. And I think the other thing I noticed for me, and I thought, well, you can't. Teams all over the world try to create this, but I think that kind of unique recruitment means that they're more resilient and unified because they've been brought up together all the way through the academies, which I think is, you can't buy that, can you?
No, let's talk about that first of all. In terms of obviously the Basque region, it's a reasonable sized region, but it's not massive.
Yeah,
It hasn't got very many massive cities in there. So they're limiting their, I guess, the net that they're spreading to
yeah,
catch the kids young. But if you're
yeah,
a young kid living in the Basque region, you've probably only got one ambition as a potential footballer, and that's to play for Athletic Club.
Absolutely, yeah,
And you get them early, you get them young, and you get them indoctrinated into the way of playing. And like you say, the culture, the teamwork, the fierce partisanship, I think, for the region. They're representing more than the club, aren't they? They're representing an ethos
yeah,
and an idea and a region and a language and a culture. And I think that's probably the thing that's made them punch above their weight for so long. And I don't mean to be patronising, they are punching above their weight in terms of what their resources could be like if they went out and bought,
mm,
Galacticos and all that kind of thing. They have to rely on local talent and they then sell that local talent to the bigger clubs at some point. And I'm assuming that's where they reinvest that in their academy and the coaching staff and all that kind of stuff. They've got a really good kind of sell on, haven't they? They've sold some great players over the years.
yeah, they have. And I love this, but one thing when I was researching it is one of their key mantras is development is paramount because it has to be,
Yeah.
because that is what that's their unique identifier, isn't it? It's like we have to develop these players because if we don't and we don't make them good enough, we're not going to be in La Liga. We're going to just fall down the leagues and disappear.
Mm.
But they don't. They're up there all the time. They're a mainstay. They compete. I mean, they won the Copa del Rey as recently as 22, 23. But their development mantra, it keeps everyone motivated. So
Mm.
everyone's motivated because they're all invested because they have to be. So there's no one takes their foot off the gas. They're always, you know, moving on to the next thing, finding the next thing to achieve greatness for their
Well,
players.
they're always in Europe, or they always appear to be in
Yeah,
Europe, whether,
yeah,
whether, whether in the Champions League, whether in the Europa League or the Conference League. They're a mainstay of European football over the years, aren't they? And I'll be honest
yeah.
with you, if you draw Athletic Club in a two-leg, game or whatever, or a one-off as they are now in Champions League and Europa League, you wouldn't fancy your chances against them, would you? Because they
No,
actually do punch way above their weight on the
yeah,
pitch as well as off the pitch, don't they?
absolutely, mate. And I think some more interesting stats, just a little bit about history, which I really loved, and it shows, and again, it also shows the influence of the English game and how long we've been around. So similar to Notts County loaning Juventus those shirts all those years ago. So for those who don't know, and I'm sure lots of people do, but Bilbao is an industrial town. So back in the day, 100 years or so ago, it had a lot of British migrants coming to do mining, shipbuilding, and a lot of them came from Southampton, Portsmouth, Sunderland. But funnily enough, um, when Bilbao originated, they played in blue and white. Um, and in 1904, a student was sent over to buy blue and white Blackburn Rovers shirts for them to play in, and he couldn't find them. And so he came back with Southampton shirts, the red and white stripes, and they adopted them because they matched Bilbao's city flag. So that's where their origination of changing from blue and white to red and white comes from.
So are we saying 100 years ago, Sports Direct weren't around that Mike Ashley could have sold them some
No,
knockoff Blackburn
no.
Rovers kit then?
And I don't know why they were sent over to buy Blackburn Rovers kits, but the guy couldn't find them. So he came back with the Southampton kits and they changed from blue and white to red and white. So
Wow.
I thought, and some other interesting bits, mate. And we're not a Borough and Everton podcast, even though we're fans of the two clubs. But I thought what was really interesting was early in their development, they had a manager called Fred Pentland, who was a player for Middlesbrough in
Right.
1908 to 1912, played 92 times, scored 11 goals. But he managed Athletic Club twice. So between 1922 and 25 and 29 and 33, and he won 6 Copa del Reys and was runner-up in the La Liga twice. And then they had another British manager, William Garber, who played for the likes of Blackburn, etc. And he was manager for 2 years between 1935 and 37 and won La Liga. So they've also got a link to British football. And for us two personally, a Borough connection, which I never knew.
Well, they've officially gone to the top of my favourite Spanish club of
Yeah,
all time now on that basis,
yeah.
and I've always liked the underdog anyway. I really I really hate the idea of watching Barca and Real Madrid
Oh,
and
I do.
Atletico Madrid. I quite like Simeone's dark arts. I quite like I
Yeah,
quite like the fact that he's such a bastard, isn't he, Simeone? But and I quite admire the fact that he goes up against the big two regularly. But officially now, Athletic are now my favourite Spanish club
favorite
because I
team.
didn't know about the Borough connection.
Well,
But let's talk about the impact because we're going to explore what's happening in Canada. There's a club in Canada trying to
yes,
follow
there
that.
is.
We'll
Yeah.
touch that in a second. And what about your club? It would never work at Premier League level because the money
No.
you'd start too low, wouldn't you? You'd start too
Yeah.
far down. But if you go back to 1967 when Celtic won the European Cup, famously the Lisbon Lions all lived or were born within 30 miles of Glasgow.
They
And they
were.
say that with a lot of pride, and quite rightly, by the way. But I suspect that in 1967, the vast majority of players on any squad lived within 30 miles of where they were playing because
Yeah,
there
they
wasn't
did.
that much migrancy. A lot of Scots played in England at the time, I guess.
Yeah, they did.
But, born and lived within 30 miles of Glasgow and they won the European Cup. Times have changed. It's a global game. If you look at how many nationalities have played in the Premier League, I think it's something in the region of about 68 different nationalities have played in the Premier League alone. So we'll talk about the consequence of if your club tried it. Certainly at a lower level, you could certainly try it potentially,
Yeah.
and then build from there. But in terms of their academy, then is their academy recognised as not just for athletic, but as an elite? You mentioned the word elite academy purely because they have to be better than almost anybody else just to compete when these kids come through the first team.
Yeah. I mean, it just said that in terms of they treat it almost like their academies are basically like a first team structure in terms of the investment in. Um, I wrote it down. Almost in the same terms of like doctors, physiotherapy, recovery, everything in terms of what you get at a professional level for in teams that you'd see now.
Mm.
They have that within their academies from a very early age because
Yeah.
they have to nurture and cherish these players and are conscious of the fact that they haven't got probably 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 people for every position coming through and load of talent that they then close off. They've got a certain amount of talent coming through, and clearly they have to nurture that as best they can. And these kids, a lot of them are coming through 5 or 6 years old, and these are the ones who are going to end up representing the team at 18, 19, and probably through beyond. So if you think about it, mate, I mean, you've got to look after that, haven't you? You've got to, if anything happens to those and they get seriously injured or they're not invested in terms of their well-being, that's another key thing. It's the well-being of the player. They're
Mm.
looking after the player behind the scenes because if that goes wrong and you neglect that, how many players? How many? You see it all the time in modern football. How many good players that aren't actually in the game because of either their own mentality or the way they've been looked after and
Mm.
nurtured or not nurtured for want of a better word, and so they're really much more invested in that because they have to be.
Couple of observations. We all love anyone who's watching this, listen to this as a football fan of whichever club. We all love a homegrown talent, don't we? I mean, to be fair,
Yeah,
sometimes they get a bit of a bum deal. Their expectations are great, a lot greater. But let's take Middlesbrough for example. At the moment, Hayden Hackney, I think, is turning into the best midfield player in the division. Now, you can argue that if you want to argue with me, whatever. But he was just voted recently on a list I saw as the most valuable player in the division in terms of transfer value.
yeah.
He's having an exceptional season and he's homegrown and it's great to see. And if we don't get promoted this season, he'll be playing in the Premier League next season because and
With
he'll
all
go.
that blessing, by the way, as well.
Yeah, without blessing, absolutely. But homegrown talent it's not rare, but it is to be loved and desired, isn't it, by every
Absolutely.
football fan? So that's great. They've got 11 starting and they've got a
Yeah,
bench full of them, which is even better. Secondly, I would imagine, I don't know, but I would imagine that they blood their young uns quite early. So there'll be quite a lot of young debuts at sort of 16, 17, 18. But I also suspect there's a lot of longevity of players in that team and
yeah, there
squad who
is.
have never
Yeah,
left, who've never been had the head turned by, more money at Betis or more money at Barca or Real Madrid, whatever, because they do it for they can earn enough money to have a good living and they can represent their club and their region, their culture. So there's a lot of wins there, isn't there? The homegrown talent is a big win, which is all of them. The second one is the blooding young talent early, which we also love to see, don't we? You look at Arsenal now, 15 and 16 year olds, and I can't remember the name of the young lad.
Max Dowman.
Max Darwin, he's getting a lot of love and praise. They'll have to look after him and be careful with him, but he's getting a lot of love and praise. He's one of theirs and whatever. And 1 year he's another young'un at Arsenal who's doing great stuff early on in his career. But that's happening all the time in Athletic, isn't it, in Bilbao? And like I say, the longevity. People love a player who's loyal, don't they?
Well, they do, and I think what that model for me encourages, which I think has gone out the game, and yes, it's different because they're doing it because it's their culture,
Hmm.
but I think that's a really valuable thing because what it means is that because it's been those players are born into that and grown up into that, it means that they actually have more values other than walking into the game and doing it for money.
Yeah.
Now, I know that a lot of players start off and they'll probably start off at their hometown club and they'll love it. And if they're great, they move on because they want to win trophies. I think because of what their ethos is and it's in them from birth onwards, it almost means more than the football,
Mhm.
which I think is really valuable. And I think it's something that's lost in life and the game. The game misses it massively. I mean, you go back to how it used to be in the 40s, 50s, and earlier in the English league, yeah, you still had transfers. Yes, you still had players that could go for big money, to different clubs. It didn't happen very often, but a lot of clubs all had players that were from those areas. Your
Yeah.
Preston North Ends, your Blackpools, your Huddersfields. These teams were successful because they had really good players that were from those regions. That's been lost in our football. It's lost throughout the world. So I think when you see a club like Athletic doing what they're doing, and it's not fading, it's going from strength to strength.
Mm.
I think they should be admired for it, and they can. To keep it is the relationship with the fans, so the fans love it completely, so they totally buy into it
Yeah.
because they're seeing players that are absolutely from their region representing them, so they know that those players love the region and love the club. They're not being
It,
bought in to then say the usual strap lines, have they?
when they kiss the badge, they genuinely mean it,
They
don't they?
genuinely mean it. Yeah,
Yeah. Now,
absolutely.
I'd like a certain ex-Middlesbrough manager who shall remain nameless to look that up and see what family genuinely means because they are a genuine family and it's not just platitudes. It's not just, well, I'll say family, I'll kiss the badge and then I'll piss off at the earliest opportunity. So that's a genuine reason I think for their success is that close knit. If you look at Middlesbrough back in 86, 87, and we were gates closed at Ayresome Park, the nucleus of our team were all Teesside lads, weren't they? And got us
Yeah, they
back
were.
to where we
That's a
wanted to
really good
be.
shout, that mate. I'd not thought of that. I was looking at that recently. The majority, I'd say, yeah, 2/3 of that team were all local lads.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
they were.
and when you're up against it, the fans and the team sort of gel, don't they? Because they're in it
We just
together.
became one back then. I remember it. It was a nerve wracking time, but when we got through it, it was a fabulous time to be involved in the club and seeing
Yeah.
them rise again. It was brilliant. It's just burned in my brain the whole thing because it was fantastic to watch, and we were as one, and we
Yeah.
needed each other completely, and it was like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's
and I
let's
think,
let's go. Let's go. I want to go at this the stuff you've researched. There's a club in Canada,
yeah,
and
brand new club.
Canada's a massive country, and their regions by very nature therefore massive, aren't you? Manitoba, Ottawa. These are big regions. Which
Yeah.
club in Canada are looking or trying or on the journey towards replicating what Athletic are doing?
So in Canada, I mean, the three biggest. It's we we both loathe the MLS, but you could argue the three biggest clubs in Canada actually play in the MLS, which is the Vancouver Whitecaps, Toronto, and Montreal. But the Canada has got the Canadian Premier League, and it's only been going 7 seasons, so it's a really new initiative.
Yeah,
So it'll be really interesting to see over time whether the likes of Whitecaps and Toronto and Montreal, you know, are they going to give up their franchise status? I don't think it's up to them. It's up to the owners, isn't it? Which is the tragedy of MLS and franchise football.
yeah.
But there's a new club, and they're called Supra du Quebec. So they're a Quebec-based club. They're brand
Mm.
new. So they're a new franchise, the ninth club in the Canadian Premier League. And they're going to adopt the athletic model because they're going to focus solely on players from the Quebec region, which, as we know, is predominantly French speaking, not English. So
Yeah.
they're going to celebrate everything Quebec, and they're going to implement the same strategy that Athletic are doing there, which you've got to hold your hat up and take your hat off and say, yeah, I love that idea because they are I think it would work because it can only for me. We were discussing where would it work, where would it wouldn't. I think there it would absolutely work
Mm.
because they're the same in terms of their cultural values.
Yeah.
They're hugely proud of their region, their culture, their language, everything about it. So to have a football club that buys into that, I think that's going to be again. They feel that's going to be a really powerful thing.
I think you're right in terms of finding the niche where culture and football collide in a good way.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think also if you look at that, Quebec's probably a big region to pull on. And if you're not, I'll be honest with you, France, if you can find French-speaking players, France are
yeah,
not bad at football, are they? You know what I mean? The
exactly.
French are pretty
Yeah,
good at football, so
yeah, they
they
are.
might have a fighting chance of unearthing some real gems. But culturally, they're going to have to go through the whole thing, aren't they, of setting the club up properly, academies, getting people to buy into the ethos and the values of that club. It's probably easier from a standing start because they've got no history to unpick, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. And we'll talk about a couple of club options going forward in England, for example. Could it work? Would it work? What would be the implications of that? But you'd wish them every success in the world for taking a stance, wouldn't you? And being different, but also they're only different because they're modelling themselves on an already successful model that's worked for 100 plus years in Spain. That people
yeah.
don't seem to actively kind of think about really. So what are they called? Something Quebec? What are they called?
Supra de Quebec, but they're just basically known as Supra, Supra, Supra.
Okay,
So they're a
I'd
brand new
like I'd
team in
like
Canada.
our
So
audience to keep an eye out for
definitely keep an
Supra
eye on them. I am.
Quebec and see what they're up to.
Yeah,
They might fall on their
absolutely.
arse, you never know, but it can only be good for their region. It can only be good for the football roots of that region. It can only be good for the young players of that region, and then the academies are the key to that. So if you adopted a model like this, I mean, it starts with the academies, doesn't it? How do you get the standard of academy to a level that means that you are genuinely, and I mean sort of feeding high quality players into the first team? There's more emphasis on the academy probably than the first team initially, isn't there? Just to get that through.
Well, there is, but I think the key bit, mate, and it, I think why it works and it's almost self-driven is, I think the key to it is that all these players are from that region. So you look at different countries and look at England, for example. Their academies are full of players from all over the country.
Yeah.
So I know certain clubs will adopt and try and make their academies full of players from the local area,
Hmm.
which I think should be a thing, and invested in more. But it's you see players from all over now, going to different clubs. So they're from all different regions. I think what makes this so powerful, and I think the reason why it works, is because if they want to play football and you can get players that have a good standard, and kids love football. So if they're playing football all the time and they're good and they're skillful, how many times have we always said you can get some players that probably aren't standout individual players, but are brilliant team players. I think the strength of Athletic is they work and always have worked well as a team. So the
Hmm.
strength is that comes from all those years of being together as team players. and
Mm.
having those same values. So it makes them kind of almost invincible in terms of their team ethic and how they play. So I think that almost is the intrinsic part of it, and that's developed kind of organically over time. I think
Mm.
that's the key strength of it because they're all from that region.
I think the key is time, though, isn't it? You know, it's
It's
that
time. It has to be time because they're
yeah.
investing in the same players for all of those years. None of those players are being sold off or moved on.
Mm.
And look at the English game. You know, they'll go to it's brutal. They'll go to certain levels, and a lot of these players will just be culled and gone
Mm.
elsewhere. Or we have
Yeah.
they'll they'll bring in players and they'll sign players of kids of 13, 14, 15, and they have to justify actually paying for these players from other clubs. I mean, paying for a player at 13, 14, 15 is
Yeah.
just what's that about? It's insanity, isn't it?
The other thing, a regular listener of ours, Dave Pride, who was involved in the sort of Leeds youth structure, he might back me up on this. I don't know, but it would be great for parents to be involved with local clubs because some parents, their kids signs if they might live in God knows Sheffield, and they are signed by Leeds Academy, which means that all the training's in Leeds and all, so 3, 4 times a week, the parents have got to get the kids up to, because kids can't drive, can they? Got to get there, got to get to Leeds for the academy training and that kind of stuff. And as a parent of an aspiring footballer, then you've invested that time, effort, and energy in your kids' development, and you've invested it as well because you've been part of that journey. I think that sets expectations of a return on investment with some
Yeah,
parents. It makes the parents really pushy because the expectations, well, we've spent hours driving up the motorway to get to this bloody training every week on a Tuesday, and suddenly my son's been or my daughter's been kicked out. So I think there's an element of local. Certainly up to a certain age, I think local would be
yeah,
great. I think I'm not sure we should ban transfers at under 15 age, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to look at the whole infrastructure of academy training. But Leeds, for example, have brought through some really good Archie Gray and various other players over the years through their academy. But what they've also done is they've had to let players go, and those players have gone to Hull, they've gone to Man City or Bolton or whatever it might be. It's a bit of a brutal thing, isn't it? The academy process and the sausage machine. But I do like the idea of kind of a localized approach to talent management. But the reality is, it's a competitive sport, and if Leeds can buy somebody who's talented who lives in Sheffield before Sheffield United can, they've got a one-upmanship on them in that opportunity to get them into the first team, further down the line. So I don't think your established clubs and your established academies are anywhere near being involved. I'll give you an example of a local grassroots thing that's happened where I live. Okay, so I live in a village called Bishopthorpe, which is just on the outskirts of York. And for years, they've had a club scene called Bishopthorpe White Rose. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, through lottery funding, they got some money to redevelop a piece of land into what you can only describe as fantastic. This is got village football kind of, fantastic facilities with beautiful changing rooms, a little bit of a grandstand, training pitches. And they've got over the last 5 or 6 years, they've got kids at all levels, they've got girls teams at all levels. But funny enough, the men's team are successful on the pitch more than they've ever been because what they've got is this community feel about, we're all in this together. And the young kids come through at under 11, under 13, under 15, aspiration to play for Bishopthorpe White Rose, their club. At
yeah,
men's team
yeah,
level, don't get me wrong, you're a 15, 16-year-old kid playing village type league football against 18-year-old blokes. You're going to get kicked to shit on a regular basis, aren't
yeah.
you,
You
at
are.
that level? But their aspirations very similar because the club have invested in the community. It's called Bishopthorpe White Rose. Everybody's part of it. It's a community feel. So that could be replicated. And I think everybody who plays for Bishopthorpe White Rose lives within, two villages of where we live. They're certainly from the York area. No one's travelling from the other side of Leeds to play for Bishopthorpe White Rose under 13. So, but what I'm saying is, at that level, the location, the locality, the desire to be part of something, it can work. So it will work in Quebec, hopefully. It certainly works in Athletic. But let's look at clubs further up the pyramid. And I'm going to pick a club because they are regular listeners and viewers. I've mentioned before. So Michelle and Simon, Simon's a massive Barnsley fan, but he's also involved in grassroots football. And I apologise, Simon, watching, listen, can't remember the name of the grassroots team. I have mentioned them before on the pod, and you're involved in the grassroots team as well. But let's take Barnsley. Okay, Barnsley are Yorkshire, and if you think of Yorkshire, you probably think of Barnsley. It's the archetypal Yorkshire place, isn't it? You
Yeah,
know,
it is.
Yorkshire Cricket Club used to have a rule that says you can't play for Yorkshire unless you were born within the boundaries of the
They
four
did.
four
Yeah.
ridings of Yorkshire, and it didn't do them any harm for many many years. They were very successful, probably the most successful county in county cricket over a number of years. Um, would or could a team like a Barnsley, they're probably too far up the pyramid, think about just recruiting from within Yorkshire? I mean, don't get me wrong, Yorkshire's a biggest county in England. There's a lot of talent in Yorkshire. You know,
Yeah.
would they be brave enough? What would happen if they did?
Well, I think it opens up the spectrum to other clubs in other areas. You see, I think this key of it is if you're recruiting from your region, I think that is why it's so compelling and it's rather tempting and exciting because you've instantly got this mix of people who were born in that locality. So I think the power of it is you're not competing against, you're not threatened by people coming in from elsewhere or buying talent and bringing talent in. You know that you're competing against people from your area,
Yeah.
which is a healthy thing. And also, it means that you're all got the same kindred spirit in terms of we want to succeed here at this club.
Hmm.
So I think that is quite compelling, and I think it would only. The thing is, if they tried to suddenly implement that, it wouldn't work immediately, would it? It just wouldn't. You'd
No,
fall. Are you talking hypothetically in terms of starting again,
no.
or
I'm talking about, okay, we've got what we've got. So we've got a squad of players at
you mean
youth
going
level and
forward?
whatever.
You
But
mean
going forward, we
yes?
only recruit from Yorkshire, as an example. So over time, as players move on and play and retire or whatever, then it would take 10 years maybe. But
So that's how it would work if you gradually implement it, so that over a time period, I think that could work. I think I think it would also mean that perhaps players that wouldn't ordinarily go to enter the system would probably be tempted to enter it because I think I would find it less brutal because it literally all the elite clubs they suck up all the talent from everywhere and
mm,
then they spit out what they don't want even if it's really good talent and it is a really brutal system. I think if it was structured in such a way that you could only or if they chose to only recruit from a certain miles radius,
yeah,
they'd only have a small pot of players to play with. So I think, or a smaller pot of players to play with, which would mean for me, I think that would mean you would nurture better,
mm,
you would encourage more,
yeah,
you would look to improve that talent. It wouldn't be the case of, well, we've got 9 players there, we're just going to cull all those. We don't need them because we've got
mm,
these or we can buy this in. I think the club are more invested and they have to be more invested into um, creating. Like I was saying before, the ethos is better in terms of the nurture. So the player is in a more nurturing environment to feel like
mm,
they can thrive. Because clearly, if those players are getting into that system, they're good enough. They're good enough at grassroots level, we're at school level, county level, to have got to a stage where Barnsley is saying you could play for us.
yeah,
So they must be of a certain level. And I'm not saying they have to be like we were saying before. You don't all have to be like worldies or mavericks. It's about being good in your position and doing your job, being a good team player, and what you
mm,
bring to the party.
yeah.
So I think it is something that could really be brought in. I think it's quite a compelling argument, to be honest, mate. But I
I
think that's
think,
quite a good example of using a club like Barnsley
mm,
because the Yorkshire thing is fiercely passionate up there as well. I
yeah,
mean, there's still got a lot of people in Yorkshire cricket who don't like the fact that it's not just solely Yorkshire, is
yeah,
it? So
true.
it's, you know,
I think a couple of advantages as well. Financially, obviously, the investment in your academies would have to go improve significantly, but your investment in playing staff would be reduced because you've already got them covered. So,
absolutely.
what you save in transfer fees and buying in talent from elsewhere, and let's take second rate, bloody Azerbaijani second division players because they want a visa to come and play. I'd rather have a local lad giving it a go. The world's full of like second rate overseas players taking spots on squads that you think, well, how the hell have they got a game over the young lads in the academy? Middlesbrough got a great academy, well respected, and quite a few academy players over the years have come through the system. However, those are blocked by, overseas players coming in, and our model is the same as everybody else's model, so we've got investment in overseas players, significant investment for a championship club, and that's fine. That's how we choose to do it. I think you're too far up the pyramid at championship level, but I think maybe at maybe a League One or a League Two level, there must be regional clubs. I took Barnsley because of the Yorkshire pride, if you like, but there's also pride in the northeast. All the northeast clubs, the big three are too far up. But Hartlepool could say we'll only take people from the northeast, for example, or Darlington could do that,
Darling,
or
good, yeah.
somebody could do that in I don't know, sort of on South Wales, for example. Where there's a passionate local heritage and a passionate local culture, it might be worth doing. And if Barnsley took 10 years to get there, but didn't see a detriment in their league positions, it might mean that they're not going to be promotion candidates in League One for a little while. But if as long as they stay in League One and sustain themselves in League One, ultimately over time, I think they would see themselves growing through the pyramid.
Well,
But more importantly, the fans would bloody love it, wouldn't they?
oh, the fans were. I think the key is the fans really buy into it because it is absolutely their town, their area, their players,
Yeah.
their lifeblood. So that's it's an absolute win-win all round. I think it's what would be really powerful there is if it worked to the point where you didn't see much drop off. So say there was a mild dip, but it wasn't a significant dip in literally dropping through the leagues. Not only would it be not only would it prove that the concept works, but can you imagine how many other clubs will be looking at that and going, we can do that, we can save ourselves a fortune.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing is, and looking at it in slightly different microcosms, but for example, Everton have got a really promising lad, Harrison Armstrong, who was out at Derby last year. He's at Preston this season.
Yeah.
He's 19-year-old, 20-year-old. He's a really eloquent lad, speaks really well when he's interviewed. He's got a really good head on his shoulders. Listened to a lovely interview the other day with Stuart McCall talking about him and said he's a great lad, really good work ethic, no problem, wants to learn, really adapts well into the teams. But I think if there was a certain encouragement, or say there was, I don't think it's ever going to happen, but say you had a rule at every level where you had to, within your first team, there had to be 3 or 4 homegrown players. I don't think it'd ever come in, but it would be interesting if it was adapted. And maybe if something like what we were talking about with this example with Barnsley came in, other clubs might think actually it's a really good way forward. But if that was the thing, he would perhaps not be loaned out all over the place. They'd have to play him. So if they had to play him, they'd have to just suck it up and get on with it.
And develop him.
And develop him. And they are developing him. But you'd also be like, well, he's in at the deep end, and it's how he also survives and he develops. But you can't tell me that if he knew he was going to, not that he knew he was going to play, but if the club model was that they were encouraging them to play and be part of that team and had to, and they couldn't just loan them out all the time, he'd learn quick and probably thrive if he's the right kind of player.
Well, 2 things to finish on before I ask you a final question. One is, I did hear a stat recently that Man United have had a homegrown player as part of their first team matchday squad every game for over the last 50 years or something like that. So Man United have certainly adopted that. And I'll be honest with you, when the class of 92, 92, is it? Whatever class of whatever year it was,
92.
all came through, you never win anything with kids, etc. Man United fans were closer to those players than they've ever been closer to the, pile of shite kind of, I guess, people who just come for a paycheck than they've got now, for example. So I think Man United certainly have adopted that on a very small scale. Very small scale. We've got no love for Man United on this pod, that's fine. What I'm saying is, if you've got a homegrown player in your matchday squad every game for the last 50 years, it has to be applauded. So we'll leave it at there. Don't dive in on them. Don't go from naught to apoplectic in a minute. Hang on a second. And then the other one is, it would it would discourage the likes of Chelsea from buying up every bit of talent that they possibly can and loaning out 47 players a season in the hope that one of them, maybe one of them, will ever get a game for Chelsea, because that's just bollocks, isn't it? You know, I think Chelsea stifle a talent by buying it in early and then farming it out and hoping for the best. Well,
Yeah,
if you're a local lad and you're in Yorkshire and your Yorkshire roots Barnsley club offer you a game and a place and whatever, versus Chelsea, who might loan you out to bloody, I don't know, Arnhem FC in Holland for a season, you might just think twice about just, signing for that money, because you might want to sign for the real reason, which is to play football. That just be, I mean, altruistic might never happen. Football's all about money. It's been spoilt by
yeah,
money. But
yeah.
what's
But
your thoughts on that?
but it's a really good thing to think about, and it might be altruistic, and it might be living in fantasy land. But how nice would it be if the game evolved to a point where it wasn't all about transfer fees and what you make in terms of the
Yeah,
player and the monetary value of it. I
yeah,
think what I like about the athletic system is there's a purity to it, because it's not transactional. There's
yeah.
no transactional. I mean, yes, you can sell players on, but in a way that's quite rewarding, because you're basically saying, look what we've produced. He's been brilliant for us. He now wants to go and do it somewhere else, but we can take that money and invest it straight back into what we're doing to do that all over again, which is a really good thing.
In my day job, one of the things I do quite a bit of leadership training, and I say from a leadership point of view, when you get people who are successful and leave you because of that success, you should celebrate that, because
Absolutely.
it's not about keeping them and keeping them to within a certain level. If someone develops as a result of your investment in them and time and energy and support and coaching and
Mm,
mentoring and all that kind of thing, and they then decide to leave, celebrate it, and then reinvest that in the next bit of talent, the next bit of talent, the next bit of talent. So
exactly.
football's no different, is it?
It's not, and I think another compelling thing for the athletic model is, if you look. I mean, I'll speak very recent history rather than going back over, because it resonate with probably more people listening. But Nico Williams is a prime example. Nico Williams was courted and wanted by Barcelona, and he might well still go to a Barcelona or a Real Madrid at some point. But he signed a big new contract last summer, and yes, he's probably been rewarded in terms of his salary, etc. But you can't tell me that part of the reason why he's re-signed is because he doesn't value what is there. Because if he didn't, he just would have walked anyway and gone. It's as simple as that. So he must value something that goes on there to re-sign and stay at that club, knowing that he's probably not going to win the key trophies. So it feels to me like there is a bit more than just winning a trophy for him.
There is, but the other thing I'd like to say about Nico Williams is he's done the right thing by his club, because if he then does sign for a Barca or a Real Madrid, he's protected the club financially with a contract that they'll have to buy out, so
Exactly
the
that.
money goes back.
Exactly
So
that.
you get a lot of players who run down there last year and don't give a shit about what that means to the club. And let's go with Trent Alexander-Arnold as an example. He could have signed a contract for Liverpool, a 3-4 year contract for Liverpool, and still signed for Real Madrid and got Liverpool some money if he'd wanted to, but he didn't, and that's fine. That's entirely. I'm not having a go at him. That's just how football works these days. But Nico Williams has said, "I'm going to sign for Athletic because I want to play for them. If I do then leave, I've protected them financially." So there's an element of like it's we're in it together kind of mentality. I
It is.
want
It's
to finish on that
protecting
we're in
that.
it
Yeah,
together
it's protecting
mentality.
that ethos, because
Yeah,
it's not. It's because they just
yeah,
can't go out and make that up by selling other players or generating that money elsewhere. So
yeah,
he's done exactly that. Yeah, and he signed, I think it was a 6-7 year contract. So
yeah.
his
Brilliant.
buyout, it'll be huge. So
Yeah,
he is.
good stuff.
He's protecting the club. So yeah, I just think it's a really fabulous model, and I admire them for sticking with it, because just as an interesting side quirk, their local rivals, um, Sociedad, they adopted the same model up until 1989, and it
Yeah.
stopped when. Can you remember why it stopped? Because they signed a certain English player,
Who did the sign? Sociedad.
John Aldridge from Liverpool,
Wow.
and when they signed Aldridge from Liverpool, it that was that stopped for them, so they don't adopt the same policy. But a lot of clubs in that region all did it, and Athletic are the only one that do. So I mean, it's faded away over the years, haven't it? Because Rangers kind of, it wasn't an official thing, whether it's like an unwritten rule that Rangers did it, so they would only play Protestant players. But
Uh,
that was between the 20s and the 80s. It wasn't an official thing, it was like an unwritten rule.
that was very.
But
Let's
it was very
let's
different. I'm not getting onto a political thing here at all. I'm just saying, but
yeah.
there was similarities in how certain clubs chose to select
Culture.
players. Yeah.
Okay. On that basis, Dom, what I'd like to say first of all, thanks for your research in this. When you brought this up as a subject to talk about, I thought, yeah, it's really interesting. Actually, it's even more fascinating having explored that with your great episode. So thank you for all your energies on that. I know you've been really passionate to get this in there. My new favourite club in Spain is Athletic, for the Middlesbrough connection, also just for the fact that they're doing the right thing. I'm going
Yeah.
to keep an eye. I'm going to keep an eye on Quebec and see how they get on with their kind of franchise soccer in
Yeah.
Canada. Not that I even know where to access the bloody results of franchise soccer in Canada, by the way. But for the last thing is, I'd like to say, I wonder if you've given anyone watching or listening from Barnsley an idea for their next 10 years of development. And if we have, Simon Jennison, let me know what you think, whether you'd see that working. And if you don't see it working, we think we're talking shit. I'm sure, Simon, because you're from Yorkshire, you'll give us it
You'll
in
tell us
both
it straight,
barrels. Yeah,
Simon.
you'll
Yeah.
tell us, mate.
Yeah.
So, listen, great episode, Dom. Thank you. I said listen there. Sorry, mate. I'm a bit Rio Ferdinand on you there, aren't I, really? So, very many apologies for that, Dom. We'll finish with the usual outro from the slide deck for those who are watching on YouTube. That has been a fantastic episode on the athletic model. Next time, in episode 27, we're going to talk about Back to the Future. I'm not going to give you any spoilers, but we're a cracking episode discussing Back to the Future. That's all I'm going to say. I'd like you to think about subscribing, liking, commenting, sharing. It's on all your favourite platforms. We're getting lots and lots of traction. The numbers are going up, quite significantly by the week, really, to be fair. So we're getting kind of increases in downloads, increase in views, increase in comments, increase in interaction. I'd love your thoughts and comments, and so would Dom, on the athletic model. Could you see it working for you? What are the downsides? Would you, in 10 years' time, look back on your club and go, we are purely this kind of regional representation with absolute pride? Thanks for your support. Dom, thanks as ever for being a brilliant sort of co-host, and we shall see you again on the next episode.
Yeah, will do, mate. Loving it. Really enjoyed that one. And yeah, thanks for your support, everyone. Really appreciate the comments and the buy-in on the pod. So yeah, long may it continue. See you on the next one, mate.
Cheers, mate.